welcome to the show, Jessica.
Hello, welcome.
So what is your clean date? Let's start there.
July 13th, 2019.
So you just celebrated 5 years?
Yep.
Congratulations. That's not an easy feat.
No, not at all.
I have 4.5 years without alcohol. I have 6 years without opiates, 5.5 without alcohol, and 5 months with benzos and weed.
That's awesome.
So a progression. uh,
No, I get it.
what was going on July 12th of 2019?
Oh, wow. I was having a too good of a time. And
What's too good of a time?
well, my intentions were to get sober after the 4th of July to like have that last hoorah, but then that binge lasted like a whole extra week. There's a bug in here. So I had um I was using crack cocaine, and one of my friends had brought over some opiates and some fentanyl. So I had done some of that, and that led to an overdose. And I also had warrants at the time. So luckily, I had that divine intervention through the Men in Blue.
Um, were you into opiates or just because opiates and crack are completely different highs? Like,
So mainly crack user, but I did start out on heroin, and then that progressed to fentanyl occasionally. So it was kind of more of like a speedball to come down, or one of
that
those
was
kind of
my that
situations.
was my next guess. Was it just to come down from crack? Um,
Yeah.
so you've definitely dipped your toe into lots of different oceans.
Yep.
Um, so let's backtrack. Where are you from?
I am from Sandusky, Ohio.
Man, there are so many people that I interview from Ohio. It is crazy. How did we meet? Do we meet in a Facebook group or
One of my Facebook friends had posted, she had done, Ashley, she had done an interview or two with you. And
six?
yeah.
Six. She's been on 6 times. Actually, if you count tomorrow night, it'll be number seven. So, okay, so
Yeah.
you're somebody that's in Ashley's circle of people that have, okay, now that
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense. Because there's been a bunch of people that I've interviewed that are friends of Ashley's, and they found me through Ashley always posting about it. So, okay, so that's why you're from Ohio, because there's so many, and there's people that I've interviewed that aren't friends with Ashley that, just so happen to be from Ohio too. Um, I even did an episode where there was four of us and they were all from Ohio. Like they didn't know each other, but they were all from Ohio, and I thought it'd be cool to have them talk to each other and see the differences. And it's called the one where they're all from Ohio. Right on the nose. So you're from Ohio. Any brothers or sisters?
um, I have a couple half siblings in Florida, but I also have one half sibling up here, but I was raised as an only child, so
Yeah, that was when did your parents get divorced?
they were never together. It was just kind of like a random hookup for my mom, and then she had me, so
All right. So, was your dad in your life at all?
nope, he was from Florida. He had come up to Ohio like some Florida people tend to do, and met my mom, and then he went back to Florida to his wife and kids. So she was kind of the side piece.
Yeah. Funny enough, I interviewed a girl from Ohio that 6 times a month, her and her husband drove to Florida to go to the pill mills back in the day. But would drive from Ohio to Florida 6 times a month. Like that's wild. That's a 23-hour car ride, she said.
Oh my God.
They would drive straight through and take turns. It would be a car full of people, and they would take turns driving the entire way. Like that's just insane. Um, so you're from Ohio, raised as an only child by your mom. When did you discover drugs and alcohol?
I think I started smoking weed around 12, 13. Progressed to like alcohol, and then that progressed to like some psychedelics and like trying, pills here or there. It wasn't very like other drugs weren't accessible to me in like high school. It was mainly just the marijuana and alcohol. So
Were you a daily pot smoker?
yeah.
So you were a little pothead?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
And were you hanging out with older people at 12, 13 in order to get weed?
Oh yeah. I see it more now. I was definitely hanging out with people who way older than me who, got had connections, who could buy alcohol. And
So you're hanging out with people older than you. And did you have a curfew or anything?
no, my mom has her own, alcoholic tendencies, so she wasn't too involved, like, and I was a teenager. I was a defiant teenager. Um and I just have to say I'm going to so and so's house, and there wasn't much follow up. So
And how old are you now?
26.
Oh, okay. So this was in the early 2000s, mid 2000s.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So you got sober young then.
Yeah, I was 21 when I got sober.
It's an ironic age to get sober in.
Isn't it? I didn't even really get to experience the whole bar scene, or like doing the things that, most people my age were doing at 21 with like drinking, but I
It,
kind of, partied hard and lost the
it's
privilege.
it's not that all that great. You end up spending a lot of money and for not a lot of payoff. And I drank hardcore for a year in the bar when I was 21. And then right around my 22nd birthday, I went on a bender of acid, shrooms, and ecstasy. And I did them for like 3 weeks straight, like different times. I wasn't doing them all at once. And I was trying to replace alcohol because alcohol kind of lost its luster with me. And then I found pills a month later, and I was like, this is exactly what I've been looking for.
Mm-hmm.
Stopped drinking, and I replaced it full on with pills. So you're 13, you're hanging out with much older people. Um, did that ever cause any kind of like trauma? Because sometimes I feel like that can like put you in a bad situation to where
Um, at that time, not so much. It was more so what the issue was is I was dating older men, like guys, and um like it was illegal, like
yeah.
so because they were, in their 20s, and I'm like 13, 14, 15. um so
And you
that
knew,
kind
you
of,
knew it was illegal.
what was that?
You knew it was illegal, right?
Yeah, no, I was well aware. I wasn't like lying about my age or anything. But so that led to some heartbreak because, I thought, oh, they're older, so it's gonna be, this is gonna work out, like they're so mature. Um so yeah, none of the trauma really happened until I was 18. Because when I first started using harder substances, like pretty much the first like super hard one I was consistent with was heroin when I was 17 in like 2016.
How
So
how
yeah.
do you get into heroin at like 17 years old? Like what's going because like now you're just like a pothead and you're drinking here and there, or unless you're drinking hard, I don't know, were you drinking like a lot of nights a week
No, not too hard, just the weekend.
and you would smoke during the week
Yep.
every day, all day kind of thing? Every day you're
Yeah,
not in school.
pretty
Uh,
much.
all right, so you're a pothead who drinks at parties, it sounds like, and which is on the weekends. So how does heroin get dropped in your lap out of nowhere? Because that's like, it's not a party drug. Heroin is
No,
not a party drug.
no.
Um, so how does that get dropped in your lap at such a young age?
So I started dating somebody who was 18, and he told me that that he was doing Opanas. Um, so that's what I thought, like in Percocets and stuff like that. So that's what I thought he had. So then I'm like, well, let me try some. Um, and he didn't want me to and tried to talk me out of it, but I wasn't gonna let that happen because it looked like he was having a good time. So um, so yeah, so inevitably I'm like, well, I've done, pills before and I've tried psychedelics and like, I'm willing to try everything once, twice if I like it, thinking like I had that ability. But
What psychedelics did you try?
like acid, shrooms, what is the
MDMA?
MDMA, PCP, ecstasy,
I got
um,
tricked into smoking angel dust before. For those who don't know, PCP is angel dust.
yes.
Um, and it's also called wet when it's mixed in a blunt.
Yep.
And I was tricked into it on Halloween in 2008.
Oh
And
my God.
I remember it like it was yesterday. And I was hallucinating so bad and I didn't know what was happening. Um, I was told when we were done the blunt that it contained PCP. And I was pissed that I was told that after I smoked this full blunt with him. And then I proceeded to throw up all over. Like I was doing jello shots all night long at this Halloween party. And it was just not a good time. And I had the worst experience ever. Um, cut to 3 years later in 2011, I was at a Blink 182 concert and it was raining. And this one guy who's in the military said, "Get in my car and we'll smoke." I said, "Sweet." Because I had pre rolled joints on me and
Hmm.
got them confiscated by the cops because at that time in Massachusetts, it's just a misdemeanor. So they didn't even write me a ticket. They just took my weed and they left. And the guy that we were partying with was like, "Come with me." And we were smoking out of a Gatorade bottle. And I was like, "Damn, this is harsh, dude." And he was like, "Well, it's wet." I was like, "It's PCP. Are you serious? This is happening to me again?" And now I knew what to expect though. So I left my phone, I left all my belongings in my friend's car because it was raining. All I brought with me were a pack of cigarettes, a lighter, and my concert ticket to get in. And I just embraced the high and didn't fight it. And I had a wonderful evening. And that's how I learned if you just embrace your high, you're going to have a good time. But if you fight it, you're going to have a bad time. And I learned that by fighting it the first time and failing miserably. So,
Right.
an acid, that was one of my favorite drugs. Acid was one of my favorites. I feel like, though, at 16, 17, you can't appreciate how good acid really is.
Yeah. No, I definitely I had done it one time randomly later in life, and it was having a bad time, so of course it wasn't that great then, because somebody was messing with me, and so I was having a bad trip. But yeah, when I was that young, it was more just like I laughed until my face hurt and then cried because my face hurt and laughed and cried, and yeah.
Yeah, because for people that don't know, acid, it gives you a great body high. It's like smoking 8 blunts to your face. Like you have a nice body high. Um, I could even say it rivals like oxys, like that good of a body high from acid. But it is so introspective. Like the thoughts that go through your head are so wild that for a teenager to have those kind of introspective thoughts would be very confusing for me. I was in my 20s when I discovered acid, and that mind fucked me to begin with. I can't imagine a teenager doing acid. Um, so now you're 18, you're about to try heroin for the first time. Did you snort it? Did you smoke it? Did you inject it?
Snorted it.
And how did that make you feel, Jess?
I threw up the whole rest of the night. But then the next morning I was like, how can I do that again but not throw up?
So you did a little less.
Right.
You didn't learn anything. All you learned was to do a little bit less than what you did before.
Pretty much.
Did you know it was heroin after you snorted it?
No, I didn't know till like 9 months later. I just kind of didn't know. Like, I didn't know that. Like, I always thought that like heroin was like some brown substance in a needle. Like, I didn't know that it could be a powder that you can snort. And yeah, I just
Looked
had
like
no idea.
cocaine.
Right.
Okay, so I think they call that China White. So this boyfriend was like tricking you into snorting heroin every day.
Pretty much. I think he was just in denial about the severity of his situation, and he didn't want to get honest with me because then that would have meant that most people would have left. But to me, once I found out, I didn't care at that point because I was already hooked. So,
Yeah, I was gonna say, were you doing it every day now?
yeah, pretty much.
Were you still smoking weed?
Not so much, no.
No, because why waste your money and waste your high on that?
Pretty much, yeah.
All right. So I'm playing catch up here again. You're 18. Now you're 18 years old. You're not 17 anymore. You're still with that dude.
Hmm.
And it's about 9 months in. Does someone tell you, like, hey, you're snorting heroin right now? Like, or does he like, listen, I need to talk to you about something? Does he sit you down and tell you the truth about what you've been putting in your body?
So he had a friend, and then I had two friends. Like, him and I had two of my high school friends move in with us, and then his friend was hanging out with us too, and he had done it too. And he ended up dating one of my friends, and so then we all ended up doing this, you know, Opanas, perks, whatever, powder together. And then his friend got honest with my friend, and then my friend was like, Jessica, your boyfriend literally is just gave us all, like, we're doing heroin. And I was like, oh, sorry guys. And they were, not too thrilled about that, but at the time I couldn't care.
Yeah. So now, what do you mean you're living with him? He already had his own place by the time he was 18, 19,
No, he moved in with me.
and your mom was still like, you were like a latchkey kid where your mom was like there but not really there.
I lived in like a apartment complex, so like my family had owned the place, so like my mom was downstairs and then I lived in the upstairs apartment. So like I moved up there, had him come move in with me, two of my other friends move in, and then we were all just kind of partying, drinking occasionally and experimenting.
Yeah, because when did you move out to your own place then?
I was 17. So 17 when I started, like when I got with him, first tried heroin, then moved upstairs, graduated high school early.
That was
Because
my
I,
question.
yeah.
So you finished school early? How do you do that?
I did homeschooling for the last 2 years of high school. I did it all in 1 year.
Okay, so you graduated at a young age.
Yep.
And were you working?
Yeah, at Subway.
Okay, so you had a job to pay the bills.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay. And now you're 17, 18, you have your own place. Is it a two-bedroom apartment?
We turned it into three. So yeah, 3 bedroom apartment.
Okay. And is he working?
Yeah, he was landscaping for his dad's company for a while, but that didn't last long.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard to keep a job when you're snorting heroin every day. Uh, Especially a labor intensive job. I wouldn't be able to do a labor intensive job when I was on pills, when I was on opiates.
Yeah.
So this was about 10 years ago,
Yep.
9, 10 years ago.
Well, yeah.
All right. So now you're snorting heroin daily, and are you going to work high?
Yes. So that only lasted so long for me too. And I tried to go to college. So then I just took out student loans and
Use that.
didn't go.
You took out student loans and then just used it to buy drugs.
Yeah.
Yep, sounds about right.
Yeah.
So you're getting some money to go to school, but you're blowing that. Literally, you're blowing it up your nose. Um, Now, how do you graduate from heroin? Like, what happens next after heroin?
So he had introduced me to like meth and didn't really care for that. And then he introduced me to like freebasing crack. And then things just like took off from there. Like that
So,
was like my I arrived moment.
so you tried meth. Did you try smoking it or snorting it?
Sorry, I'm like super popular.
Did you try smoking or snorting it
um
with meth?
the crack.
With
Oh,
meth.
meth. I think we tried smoke. We smoked it off foil.
So you were freebasing the meth,
Yeah.
but you didn't like that though.
No, I don't care for that.
Did he like it?
Kinda. He was more of into the heroin scene.
I was gonna say because they're two different, highs that you're producing. Um, and then I guess you were just 18 years old and just experimenting with anything that you could get your hands on at that point, right?
Pretty much. And I wasn't going anywhere to get it, so like he was the only person that I could really get anything from. So,
All right. And is there any consequences yet? Like anything happening?
um he since he wasn't working, I started exotic dancing and that only lasted so long cuz I couldn't really function like I couldn't keep gas in the car to go to work to make money or working got in the way of me getting high. So that didn't work for me. So then he started like stealing from like pretty much anybody, and that kind of had some consequences. Like somebody, when I was gone at one point, somebody like broke into our house, and I don't know, they were looking for whatever he stole. But no legal consequences at that point.
So you can't keep a job anymore because it's getting the way you're using. Um, Now, could you even get a hold of any kind of drugs if it wasn't for him?
At one of the clubs I worked at, there was a guy that would sell cocaine. But I didn't really care. I don't like cocaine. I liked crack, so not really.
Now, okay, they're like cousins of each other, in a sense. How come you didn't like coke?
It wasn't as intense. It's like it's kind of reminds me of when I hear people say like once you start shooting or being an IV user, you kind of just don't go back because it's a waste. That's how I feel with coke.
Because you had already tried crack.
Right.
Okay, so you already skipped the coke phase and went right into crack.
Yep. I
Okay.
mean, I had a little phase for like a brief second, but um, it wasn't. It was more of like a do it at the club because people have it there.
And at that point, you just if you get in front of any drug, you're gonna try it.
Yeah, pretty much, especially if it's free.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, if it's free, it's for me. Um,
Right.
I was easily persuaded too when I tried ecstasy. Um, my friends had a keys to my apartment because I was, working or home, and they would need somewhere to hang out and smoke weed. So they would just go into my apartment and smoke. And they walked in at like 10 o'clock at night, and I worked retail, so I worked all weekend long. And they came into my room and they're like, "Hey." You're like, you got to get up. And I was like, no, it's 10 o'clock at night. I got work tomorrow. And my friend like held up a baggie filled with pills. He's like, I have ecstasy and we're going to do a bunch. And I was like, I'm not doing that right now. It's 10 o'clock at night. And then my other friend said, fine, there's a drug that I'll have done and you never did before. I said, fine, I'll take two. And I got up. I got up, I got dressed, and I started rolling my face off and went over to Philadelphia because I lived 5 minutes from Philly at the time. So I went over the bridge and hung out in Philly all night, just high as shit on ecstasy. And I found myself doing that 3 times in the next week because my friend just had a whole baggie full of them. So we just rolled all the time for that week. And then once like that dried up is around the time that I introduced the acid. And I was like, now this is what I've been looking for. This is the shit. And then the problem was, like I said, I was trying to replace alcohol when I was 22. And I thought I found that in LSD. But the problem is, I needed the day off the next day every time I took acid. And I can't work when I'm tripping. And that shit lasts sometimes 18 hours. So that means I
Right.
need 2 days off just to do acid. And I need a drug that I can do every single day and I can go to work
Mhm.
high. I need to have all these things. And then when I found pills, that was my I have arrived moment. That I mean, alcohol was my arrival and it was definitely a gateway drug into pills. I don't blame weed too much. Weed just wasn't strong enough to keep my attention back then. I smoked weed to keep up appearances. You know what I mean? Like, oh, JD's just really high. He smoked a bunch. But really, I was high on
Mhm.
pills and I barely smoked. And I just wanted to make it look like I was high. So I would smoke a little bit. And like, man, JD's a real lightweight. And really, I would just be like on 150 milligrams of oxy and just be high off my ass. Um, so now you said you exotic dance. Is that different clubs you tried or just one club?
I worked at two different ones. One was like the first one I went to was very upscale, very nice and classy, and the other one was like a truck stop.
Oh, okay. But that didn't last long now because you couldn't.
No,
Yeah.
yeah.
All right. So now when do you meet Mr. Crack? How old were you?
Um, I think I was like 18 and a half, almost 19 at that point. Um, so he introduced me to that, and then that's when I really started to realize like, hey, I don't really want to do heroin anymore. I want to do more of this. And he, that wasn't his drug of choice, so he had to go, and I had to figure out how I'm gonna get crack now.
And how did you figure that out?
I had it took it like I was like, okay, I'm gonna drop you off at your house because we got in a fight over it because it was my money that we were spending at the time, and he wouldn't go to his plug to get me what I wanted. So he's like, I'm only gonna get heroin, and I was like, well, I'm not giving you my money, so I'll just drop you off at your mom's. So that's what I did, and then I literally just sat there and thought about like anybody I'd ever done any substances with. Cause of course, like he'd have friends or like something that would come over that he'd buy drugs from or something or another. So I thought really hard about it. And I'm like, actually, one of my dancing friends had taken me, like when I was giving her a ride home, she had me stop by this person's house and I had, gotten something over there. So I just showed up at this person's house and tried my luck and I got lucky. So
So you just knocked up on a random door that you thought was the right place?
well, like I'd been there once before with one of the girls I had danced with, so I thought, it wouldn't hurt to try to see if that person was still there and they would remember me. So
And did you
I
remember their name at least? You don't have to say their name, but did you remember their name?
oh yeah, it took in a while to think about it because I didn't have to, you know, ever go get nothing from them or anything.
Okay, so you show up and you say, "Hey, random dude that I met once. Um, I know you have cocaine, but do you also have crack?"
Pretty much, yeah.
Like, is that did I nail it? Is that what happened?
Mhm.
And he
Yeah.
was and he was just like, "Now that you mentioned it, Jess, that I met once, I do have crack, and here's plenty for you.
Well, I only had $20, so that was, yeah,
Well,
short
here's
lived.
$20 worth for you."
Yeah. Yep.
Man, that would never work as a guy. I could never knock up on someone's house and be like, "Yo, man, you remember me from a couple months ago? I'm here to buy your crack instead of your coke. You have crack, sir?" Like that would never work for me.
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
yeah, that it was bad enough that everyone thought everyone was a rat when you're on drugs because you start like skitzing out and you're like, no,
Right.
this person's a rat, that person's a rat, that person's an undercover, all that kind of shit. Um, how old were you when this happened? When you randomly found some crack? That's gonna be the name of this episode, by the way. Jess randomly finds crack.
I was probably in like 19 at this point because that's when I ventured out on my own. Because after I dropped him off at his mom's, I never picked him up again. I mean, we had like hooked up or got together here or there throughout the years after, but we never like got back together. So, yeah, I was probably about 19 when things really took off. Cause yeah, and then at that point it was hard because it's like, and I only had that one person and he wasn't really big, big dope boy or anything. He just little guy. So
Yeah,
then
you're
I
lucky
had
that
to,
it wasn't his parents' house or something. Like, hey, mister, is your son here the guy with the crack?
right. He'd be like, what?
So, 19 years old, you finally have a connection of your own that you can go to, but you can't get
Mm-mm,
like bulk from because he's not like a high roller. Um,
mm-mm.
and you were in your apartment. Did you have roommates still?
No, they had all moved out, on to bigger, better things. My mom even moved out. So then I moved into the downstairs of my apartment. And then the upstairs was just vacant.
Okay. And now at this point, you're living by yourself and you're 19 years old. And are you working?
I was still trying to go to the club when I could. So kind of not really. And then things kind of, I started like meeting other people that I forget how I got in contact with somebody. Somebody was like, what brought it up for me to be like, oh, you sell. I think it was drug seeking. I was trying to find somebody who had something. So, one of my friends' ex boyfriends had sold. I knew he sold drugs, so I like asked him. I'm like, hey, again, do you have any crack? And he's like, yeah. So then that became my plug, and he like introduced me to like a whole plethora of people who had drugs.
Okay. So once again, you're randomly finding more crack. And this one's a more
Yes.
consistent plug.
Yep.
Okay. And that means you're once you find and I know this answer already because I have been in your shoes. Once you find a consistent plug, that means you are going to consistently use your drug of choice because it's so readily available at your fingertips.
Yep.
And how are you supporting that habit?
Well, at first, when I was approached by dealers that I could offer them favors for, substance, for crack, I was appalled. And I was like, I have money. I'm coming to you with money. Why would I have sex with you or do whatever with you? I was so confused. But then I came around and was like, well, I the time came where I don't have money, and then I'm like, well, is that offer still on the table? So then that's when I started prostituting at that point.
Okay, and you were like 20 years old now?
No, like 19 to 20, I mean, up until the end. So
Oh, okay. So that's how um like Craigslist kind of thing, or like is there's a
Backpage was a thing then, I
oh,
think it
okay.
was called.
I think I remember that. Because this
Yeah.
is like 6, 7 years ago.
Yep. It got shut down. Like, I did it briefly. I met a couple people that were consistent, clients, and I didn't really need to be on it too much to, you know, support stuff.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, because crack is one of the cheaper drugs, you know what I mean, out of because some people slam $200 or $300 worth of heroin a day. And how much is your habit a day costing you?
it was about 100,
Oh, you were doing
consistently 100
$100
bucks.
with the crack a day, basically.
Um, Roughly anywhere from like 50 to 100.
Oh, okay. I think
Probably more like 50.
I was spending like 250 a day on pills.
Oh
Yeah,
God.
and I was a daily user. I was driving 2 hours to get them for my last 2 years, and
Jesus.
each way, 2 hours each way. But my parents lived near where my dealer was, so I could just say to my parents, like, "Hey, I'm coming to visit you guys." And then I would go drive to my dealer, meet him, and then go to my parents' house and then stay there for a few days and pick up from my dealer for a few days and then drive back with some bulk to last me a few days before I'm like, well, I got to drive back to Jersey again, drive on back to Jersey again. Um, Sandusky, Ohio is from Tommy Boy. You're too young. The movie Tommy Boy with Chris Farley and David Spade came out before you were born. No, it came out in '96. So when were you born?
98.
Okay, so yep, the movie came out before you were born, but it takes place in Sandusky, Ohio, and that's where I know that name from. It's been bothering me for 40 minutes. Um, uh, all right. So now you are on Backpage. You're supporting your habit daily. Is anybody asking you questions about like your mom? Like, hey, are you working, Jess?
No, I think that it kind of just got swept under the rug, and then I ended up moving out and just kind of couch surfing at that point. So then my mom moved back into the house because it was a family owned, like my grandparents owned the house. So then my mom moved back into it, and then I would just kind of pop in there. Um, and like my mom kind of knew what was going on, but I don't think she knew like the full extent. Um, and she like tried to get me to like get help, kind of, but I don't think she really knew what to do.
Now, were you noticeably on crack? Were you like skin and bones?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
All right. Do you have one of those crazy before and after pictures?
Yep.
Are you going to send it to me so I can put it in the episode right now? All
I can do that.
right. Before and afters are awesome. They because it it's nothing like I've had so many crazy before and afters on this show, and I love highlighting them because it shows how much progression and how much progress people make in their recovery by seeing the after picture, because people are learning who you are right now, Jess, but to learn and to see physically what you look like before always goes, oh, like, you know what I mean, like it takes people back a little bit. And so I always like
Mhm.
showing before and afters if I can. So you're noticeably on crack, you're couch surfing, you're 20 years old. Um, when you turned 21, were you still smoking crack
Yes.
and not drinking, right? Because drinking
Nope,
was
not
cool.
drinking. I had bought like a Jello shot at a gas station with my 21-year-old ID that, and I never ended up taking it. It sat in the fridge until I got sober.
They sell Jello shots around there.
Mm-hmm.
That's so weird. Like, what the fuck, Ohio? It's so weird.
They have like drive-through carry-out gas stations. Like it's like you drive through it and
Yeah, and I've been to them in North Carolina, where it's a drive-through and there's just stacks of beer on both sides, and you just pull up and you say what you want, and they just throw it in your back seat.
yep.
Um, that's how it's like in Outer Banks in North Carolina. There's a bunch of drive-throughs, so I've been to them before. Um, all right, so we're almost to July 12th. Um, so July 12th, 2019 rolls around and you're smoking crack, and then your friends brought heroin over.
Or fentanyl, because at some point between, I think around when I turned 19, 20, fentanyl started getting real popular.
Okay, so that makes sense. You were doing heroin before, and now are you? Do you know you're doing fentanyl, or were you told it was heroin?
No, I knew I was doing fentanyl.
And you just wanted to try it at that point since it's a new drug.
I just didn't care. So I just knew that heroin just wasn't accessible anymore to me. So that was the next best thing. That's what took its place. And so then I started doing that for come downs and,
Yeah. And like you said earlier, you were going to quit after the 4th of July.
yep. I had had a couple tastes of sobriety here or there. Once in 2017, I got some legal consequences and that resulted into like a rehab trip. And then the beginning of 2019 in February, because my birthday was the end of January, so I turned 21, and then mid-February I'd gotten picked up on some legal charges for possession and stuff. And I went and got sober for a couple months then, and then
And
I went back out for 2 months, and then July 12th rolled around.
now, July 13th, do you go to rehab again?
No. So when I had overdosed, I had warrants, so they took me straight to jail.
And did you have to serve any time?
Yes, I sat for like 2 weeks, maybe three. I think it was like
Okay.
three.
So you did about 3 weeks for possession and warrants for possession.
Yep.
Okay. And that's what got you to sober up in that time period is your time spent in there.
Well, that and then I, rather than sitting around waiting for them to, I figured they would inevitably either sentence me to time because I had sat time also. I had sat like 45 days. I was sentenced to 45 days also prior in my use for soliciting. And yeah, so I thought they were just going to sentence me to time and I didn't want to sit time and I wanted to be sober. So I was like, let me try to get my lawyer to get me to go to rehab. So then I went to rehab.
All right. And did you go to rehab locally or did you go like further away? Like
I
I
went
was in
about,
Jersey, but I went to rehab in Los Angeles.
I didn't go anywhere fun far away. People in Ohio go to Florida to get sober for fun.
That's where Jersey goes to. They go to Florida. And
Mhm.
my mom even said to me, "Why aren't you going to Florida like everybody else does?" And I said, "That's just the problem. I don't want to be where I know anybody. I want to go somewhere where I can completely start fresh and no one knows my history and I can start over." So I went all the way to Los Angeles instead of going to fucking what's it called? Delray Beach. You know what I mean? That's like the popular area people go to get clean is Delray Beach. Um, so I wasn't going to go to Florida, even though people were trying to get me to go. Florida was not for me, and it's way too fucking humid in Florida for me. And I lived in West LA where it was like really beautiful weather and not too hot, not too humid. You wake up with a hoodie on because it was 60 degrees out and it felt amazing. So yeah, I went to the right place for my recovery. Now you're in rehab because you want to be in rehab this time.
Yep.
And did you get introduced to like AA or NA?
Both. They did more NA at the one I went to, but AA too.
Is there one that stuck with you over the last 5 years?
AA.
AA, so you're still an active member?
Yep.
Do you have a sponsor and everything like that? You've been through the steps?
Yes, I have the same sponsor, or I had one. I've gone through two sponsors. I only had the one for a couple months, but then I moved. But I have a sponsor. I've worked the steps, and I sponsor multiple other women. I have a home group. Very active in the AA community, and I work in recovery as well.
Oh, you do?
Yep.
Okay. That's something that I want to do. I'm going to get my CRS to be a certified recovery coach. And
Yep.
what's that?
I
Is
was gonna
that
say that's what I do. But I also have my CDCA, and I'm working towards my bachelor's in social work and my LCDC.
I don't know what the abbreviations mean, but I know that I am going to finish out because I already have like 30 credits towards my psychology degree. So I'm going to finish my psych degree and then become a therapist and get my drug and alcohol counseling certification once I finish college. But in the meantime, I'm going to get my CRS so that I can work in recovery while I go to school to then work as a therapist in recovery. Is that kind of the same path you're on?
Yes. So I definitely recommend getting into a job where you're, doing recovery work, because that's been great for me, and it's given me like that boost of confidence and knowing that, like, hey, when I get into this field fully, like, because peer supporting is great and it's my full-time job, but my goal is to help, like, be a case manager for people who are, trying to get sober, um and work with them that way. But foot's in the door. I've worked for a sober living before, and kind of have that background. And then the CDCA is like dependency counseling assistant, and then the LCDC is like the license of that. So you're like a licensed chemical dependency counselor
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
in
Yeah,
Ohio, at least.
that's awesome. Work towards and have those goals. Um, I had learned through other people on here that I should be a therapist, and I've heard it so many times. I'm like, why the fuck am I not just going for this now? Like, if I can get paid to do what I do, and because there's no money in podcasting when you're at my level, there's money in
Right.
podcasting if you're like a higher up that gets thousands of views for every video. But my views are not, they're hundreds. I get in the hundreds sometimes. I get more views if the person I'm interviewing shares their story. You know how Ashley shares her episode on
Yeah.
her Facebook page? Her episodes get a lot of views because she shares them. If I was to just share them for people that follow me, I wouldn't get as many views. So it really depends on the person that I'm interviewing if they're going to share it or not, depending on how many views I get. So it's not consistent enough for me to make money off of. So that's why I
Right.
don't have any ads, because I'm not going to bore people with ads when I'm going to make dollars on the cents or cents on the dollars. So, but I would love to do a podcast full time, because I really enjoy it. And then people are like, well, why don't you just become a therapist then? It's like the same thing, JD. And I was like, hey, you're right. Why am I not just finishing school? I'm already halfway to a degree. And I talked to the local school here, and all my credits will transfer from 20 years ago when I first was in college.
That's
So
awesome.
I was relieved to find that out because my credits are literally from 2005, 2006. and 2007. So that's a long time ago. But I'm glad that you're working a program now. I'm glad that, you're so active in the community because you wouldn't be sitting here right now 5 years sober if it wasn't for being active in the community.
Hmm.
Especially AA, it's good to be active in. Do you do HNI also?
I don't even know what that is.
Hospitals and institutions when you bring
Um,
meetings into jails and shit like that.
no, I have
They might
not
call it
gotten
like
the opportunity to do that.
they might call it something different in Ohio. I'm not every you know how it is. Everywhere they call different things. In Pennsylvania, they call it HNI for hospitals and institutions, where you bring a
I've
meeting.
gone to detoxes, like spoke
Okay,
at detox.
okay, yeah, that's institutions. That's the I
Mhm.
in HNI, and it's always a rewarding thing to speak at old rehabs and speak at detoxes because even if you can get one person's attention, it's a win.
Absolutely. I have done a panel too, for the rehab I had first ever got sober at. Me and two other girls from where I live had been asked to go out there because we ended up all going to the same place one of the times that we were incarcerated. So we got to go back about a year ago and go speak to the people there at that rehab.
That's all. I like panels a lot. A panel, for those who don't know, is people. There's multiple of you that sit at a table and kind of all share your story for the group to hear. And I know our panel, we took questions. We did like a Q&A where people would ask us questions and shit like that. I'm not sure how you guys did it. This was when I was on panels in Los Angeles. I never did any kind of hospital and institution in Pennsylvania. I've always done them in California. So I don't know how they do things around here. Um, I've done panel interviews and I thought about bringing that back. I feel like I should do a mega Ohio episode with all these people from Ohio and try to get them all on the screen at one time and talk about your shared experiences because holy shit, you all have so much in common. It's crazy. It is crazy. So thank you for taking the time to sit down with me today. I appreciate it. I appreciate you being so open and honest about your story. I know it's never easy to kind of relive some of that trauma, but you got through it like a champion, and I appreciate that. So thank you, Jess, and have a nice day.
Thank you, you too.
Bye.
Bye.